Hello and welcome to the Jewellers Academy podcast. My name is Kim Thomson, a full-time jewellery tutor based in Bristol, UK. I'm passionate that jewellery making should be accessible for all, and I've spent the last 2 decades striving to help people achieve and create jewellery that they are proud of, no matter their age, experience, learning style, or physical ability. This week, I'm really excited to be talking to Charlotte Smith from Foraged Steel. Char creates sculptures and wearable pieces, giving foraged metals a new lease of life with a strong focus on using recycled materials. She also teaches at WTF workshops, which is Women Teaching Fabrication. Hi, Char, how are you? Thank you for being on the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm good, thank you. Very excited to be here and chat with you about metal.
Lovely. It's lovely to see you, another local Bristol, well, Bristolish person.
Yeah, no, well, I was originally from Bristol and took a sort of family hiatus to Somerset, but I'm back in Bristol and yeah, it's really nice. I'm really glad to be back.
It's a great city, is it? We're really lucky in terms of, well, jewellery in general. I think we're extremely lucky, but just creative stuff is
Massively. There's so many independents around here and so many like creative markets and things like that. It's just a very arty place to be and it's really nice.
and I take it for granted as well. It's not until I speak to people who aren't from the city that you realise it's not the same everywhere.
Yes, I was in a tiny, tiny town in Somerset where there's, not necessarily the most things going on for stuff like that. So being somewhere where it's so accessible and there's just so much around, you're kind of spoilt for choice.
We really are. So in terms of things being spoilt for choice and access to stuff and creative interest, what sparked your interest in metals and how did you get started in your career?
Yeah, so I come from probably a bit more of an untraditional background in terms of metalworking. I started as a HGV or lorry mechanic. So I was 23 and I started doing my apprenticeship. I'd always sort of been really practical. I'd done my art and design foundation, so I've always enjoyed using my hands and doing, as she says, wobbling them around everywhere. I've always enjoyed using my hands and being practical. Always been sort of that more tomboy sort of person. So I then finally got into my mechanics and I loved it. But from that, started doing some fabrication. Lorry drivers love to hit lorries as well as drive them. So you're quite often having to repair like trailer bumpers and things like that. So that's when I started welding and I loved it. And then sort of that bridge between repairing and you like creating metalwork and that sort of creative background I had, it sort of all came together. I didn't know where, like I'd done textile design and stuff like that, but nothing really clicked. And then, yeah, I started playing with metal, the welding, the fabrication, and it all sort of made sense. So I started doing an evening course in silversmithing as well, whilst I was training to be a lorry mechanic. And one of the first pieces I made that made me do my silversmithing was my brother had actually passed away and we had some of his ashes. So creating a necklace to have the ashes in was something really personal. And from there sparked this sort of, oh, wow, I can do so much stuff with this and that love and enjoyment.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I say, having full control over being able to make something that special as well, it just gives it that extra level.
Absolutely. Yeah. I made one for myself and my family. So like his son and daughter who'd also obviously lost their dad. So creating something like that was so, yeah, it was just so personal and so it was such a powerful thing to create for that first time. So it really sort of sparked that, wow, what else could I do? And yeah, experimenting and playing with metal is just a lot of fun.
And I did art foundation as well. I loved it because it's
Okay.
little tasters, isn't it?
Yes.
Trying to feel. But even with those little tasters, I would imagine the leap from art foundation to lorry mechanic is still quite a big one. So how did that come about?
It was quite a big gap, yeah, definitely. But like you say, it was great for those little tasters, but nothing quite clicked. I enjoyed lots of different aspects, but nothing. I've always been a bit of a jack of all trades, but a master of none, which I know there's more to that saying, which it makes it positive. But so from doing that, I was sort of not sure what I wanted to do. And I worked in retail for a bit just to sort of figure out. I didn't go to uni or anything like that. And I was actually talking to a friend in the pub. Her husband was a lorry mechanic. And I was like, I've always wanted to do mechanics, like just never thought as a 13-year-old girl in secondary school, especially in a small town in Somerset, you're not told that you can do these things. So it's why I didn't get started till I was 23. And yeah, I loved it. Quite often did very well in my class and stuff like that, because as a woman, generally you have to work harder in those roles to make yourself as equal as a man, which obviously shouldn't be the case. But yeah, a lot of women that you'll speak to in male dominated industries, quite often one thing they'll say is you have to work twice as hard to have the same recognition as a man, which is, yeah, pretty rubbish.
I think pretty much all the men in my family are from sort of engineering background.
And that's the thing. It's so easy for males to feel like they can go into those roles. You're told you can from such a young age in school and things, whereas women, we're not given that same rite of passage, I guess.
No, definitely. And so all the cousins were all female, pretty much. There's a couple of token males, but there's quite a few of us, and we're mostly female. But one of my cousins went down the engineering. Sorry, two, but one of my female cousins went down the engineering route, and yeah, she's very much had to. Well, I say had to. She works extremely hard, and recently she was offered a rather nice promotion, and then she had this, oh, but what if they're giving it to me because
Yeah,
and that wouldn't, like, say that most of the time that would not be on somebody's minds, and it's just, but you've worked so hard, just take it. And I'm sure it wasn't for that, but just for example, say if it was a tick box exercise, then take it and prove that you're a good job. Just grab it, don't say no.
Exactly. It's so hard because I think in any way you feel like it's never a win-win. It's always sort of a lose-lose. So you worked really hard and yeah, you might deserve that promotion, but exactly that, you think, oh, I'm just the token female, I'm just ticking that box. So you don't feel like you've earned it. So it's really, really hard, I think, for women in male dominated industries to ever feel worthy, which yeah, it shouldn't be the case at all. But you feel like we said, you have to work twice as hard to feel even the same as a man. And yeah, then you get the promotions and you still feel not good enough, which is just, that's why I was so, yeah, I love talking about it. I love working with other women and talking with other women and building that confidence in these roles, because why on earth shouldn't you be able to do it? As long as you are practically minded and able to, then why shouldn't you be given the same opportunities? I just, yeah, something I feel very passionately about.
I think when I emailed you is because I was in full rant mode.
Yeah.
Around International Women's Day.
Yeah. I'm always full rant when it comes to feminism. Yeah, to a fault.
Really, really easy going. It's a bit like, just floating around along, doing my own thing, don't really think about things too much. But every now and again, I was just, oh my God. But one of the things that's always, poodling along in the background is the amount of women that come to my classes terrified.
Yeah.
Tools.
Yeah.
And frames and, all the stuff that we use as jewelers, which normally, it's fair enough. But equally, when you sort of talk to people and you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, it's always tends to be because they've been told that it's not safe, it's not for them, they can't be trusted.
Yeah.
That it's a man's thing, women don't use tools, you're not allowed to touch these, you'll break them, or you'll hurt yourself. But equally, we're allowed to use heavy machinery in the household, and we're allowed to use gas and flames and heat and sharp knives and look after small humans
and birth them. I mean, we're pretty impressive being able to do that.
So yeah, I get very, very frustrated, not with the individuals, but just with society, when there's so many women that feel they can't. Intimidated, exactly, 100%.
No, massively. I think that's one of the things, like, so when we teach at WTF, we have to give an introduction into all of the tools, because it is in a dangerous environment, and if you use a grinder incorrectly, you're going to chop your fingers off. So we have to say those things, but it's really important. All of us will try to say, we're giving you this oversight just to give you a rundown of what's going on for the day. And obviously you did one of our courses, this. So we sort of want to give everyone an insight, but then also it's really important to say, but don't be scared. I'm just telling you the worst case scenario, but it's not going to happen, so don't worry. but it is that intimidation. And I'm really lucky. My dad was the least practical man at all. So growing up, I was very much not afraid to use tools. I was often in the garage using his tools more than him. Would always put the flat pack together in the house and everything like that. So kind of built my own confidence with tools. But I think if you're grown up in a, I guess, traditional household where males do those roles and things, you're going to always feel like it's not your place to do it. And if you then move out on your own or anything and you need to use a drill or you need to use a hammer or anything, you should feel 100% safe and confident using it, because you need to use it as much as a man. It baffles me, but it's one of those things I think we still need to talk about so much, because feminism has come so far, but in some industries it's got a long way to go still, massively.
Yeah, but even like you say, just growing up and being a child and your support system and your family around you. I messaged my parents this morning because I just had this little flashback. It was my favorite toy when I was maybe sort of 3-4 years old, and it was a Fisher Price garage.
Yeah.
But I'm the eldest out of all my cousins, and it's the early 80s. We didn't have a lot of money like most people, didn't in the early 80s. So I messaged my parents and I was like, can I just ask, why did you buy it for me, or was it a hand-me-down from somewhere else? My dad's reply was, we bought it for you for your Christmas. We were progressive parents, no gender. Yeah.
But that's the thing, it's simple things like that that make such a difference. Like I expect like playing with even like kids' toys and stuff that are tools, you then felt more accessible when it came to actually playing with a real life hammer and stuff. And yeah, I think it's really important that like girls from that young age feel like they can do these things, because why can't they? Because they've always been told they can't. That's not a good enough excuse anymore.
Yeah. And same growing up, I was always in the shed with my granddad when I was tiny, using hammers and planes and drills and bolts.
I remember so often I'd find like old photo frames and stuff in the garage, and then like I'd be nailing like little nails on so I could hang my jewellery on it and stuff like that. Like it's just, and that's what I love about WTF workshops as well, because it's all scrap metal. So it's very much in like allowing you to be your inner child to come out a bit and just experiment and play. There's something so wholesome in that. Just, I think as an adult, we so often get weighed down in the mundane 9-to-5 life and stuff. It's important to remember that art and metalwork or tools and all of this stuff can be so experimental and allow you that place to just be a bit free and enjoy yourself and be a child again.
Exactly. You were talking before about how a lot of women in particular feel quite intimidated when it comes to tools, machinery, all that sort of stuff. So when you chose to go into the HTV, did you find it intimidating? Did you find, did anything change when you started, so your first few weeks, your few months, or did you just throw yourself in head first?
I was absolutely terrified. I can't deny that. Like, you're going into a job that you've never done before, because obviously I went in as an apprentice. So I went in with no previous knowledge of mechanics or anything like that. So that was terrifying. I was going into a workplace where I knew I was going to be the only female, and I was the whole time I was there. And yeah, it was terrifying. But I think the one good thing for me was being 23. If I'd gone in when I was 16, I wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes. If I'm completely honest, I wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes, because I had to have such a hard and thick skin, even as a 23-year-old, that, I definitely had to throw myself in. But if I was 16, I wouldn't have stood a chance. And even still, sadly, I ended up walking away from that career because of certain things that I just couldn't do anymore. Part of it was my dad got really ill and he passed away. And the treatment towards me, perhaps as a woman going through that, wasn't the same as it would be for a man.
Was it sort of that banter environment?
Banter. I mean, I was I don't know if I can swear, but I was quite often called a bitch. I mean, nearly every day. You're called bossy, moody, all of these things, because you just have to assert yourself. And if you're a man and you assert yourself, you're confident. If you're a woman and you assert yourself, you're moody or miserable or bossy. So yeah, I think it was if I was 16, I definitely could have done it, but being that little bit older definitely helped, because you could the dissimilarities in the treatment between men and female is so obvious, especially as a female experiencing it. So yeah, I always try and encourage people to go into it, but I completely understand why it's so difficult and why people would struggle. Um, every female mechanic I know, or every female lorry mechanic anyway, has left the industry since I was training, which is really sad, really sad. But sadly, there's a lot of progression still to happen.
And it's strange as well, because you do get a fair few female lorry drivers.
Yes, I think that's become much more common and things. And I think perhaps between, I don't know, perhaps between the difference between the drivers and that sort of mechanical side is that slightly less practical, so perhaps slightly less egotistical, maybe. I don't know, it's hard to pinpoint, but I think drivers it could be much more accessible because it's sort of an open playing field, whereas yeah, like if you speak to anyone, how many female mechanics can you name, like that you know, or that people know? So whereas lorry drivers are becoming a more popular thing, and I think that can only help the industry, and it'll only help women get into other roles in it as well. But yeah, there's still a long way to go. I think that's the same for any sort of male dominated industry. My friend's a submarine engineer, and she's one of few, and yeah, we often talk about it because we both have experienced very similar, sadly, experiences.
The I'd imagine the skills that you learnt though must be quite transferable to a whole host of hands-on things,
Yeah,
especially the side of things.
yeah, I mean, my boyfriend sadly has a French car, which I'm not a fan of French cars, I must admit, and often have to repair it. So that's one really good thing. I've saved us quite a lot of money on that. And also, one thing I'm really keen to sort of do in the future is do some of, I like put up a story on my Instagram the other week, and I was like talking about changing, I had to put some oil in the car and sort of saying, how many of you know how to change your oil or top up your oil, check your oil, these sorts of basic things? And quite a few
Really, really basic. Yeah.
yeah, and a few people didn't because they've never been shown or they didn't feel confident. So one thing I'd love to do in the future is do a bit more of that on Instagram and things, sort of, how to do your basic maintenance checks and things. So women feel that they can do it because, if your dad's not around or your boyfriend's not around or whatever, you should feel confident in yourself to still be able to do those things. And I think that's really important, is making things like that more accessible. Like we said, I think so often women feel that these things aren't accessible to you. Having lovely platforms and people to build up your confidence is so important for that.
Yeah, 100%. And I'd definitely love to see something like that, because things like the oil change and stuff, I'll do that. And normally, going back to when I was younger and didn't have very much money, it was needs a must a lot of the time. So for example, if
Exactly.
someone smashes the wing mirror off, I ordered a new one on eBay, and then you sat figuring out how to attach the blooming thing. Or how to get your hand and actually change the headlights, because they always manage to sort of hide them and make it as awkward as possible. But
Oh,
actually, with someone with hands, I'm probably better placed at being able to do it than somebody with larger hands.
I've actually got massive hands for quite a small, quite a small female. So that's one thing I always struggle with, is I so often will end up saying, the engineers who make these cars or whatever, they don't think about the mechanics who've got to get in these little spots where you've got to get your hand like this just to change a light bulb and stuff. So yeah, and that's the thing. So like the other week we had some engineers come to WTF because they've been to uni and they do all these lovely drawings for these like buildings and things like this, and they're telling welders what welds to do on these things, but they've never done welding, and that blows my mind. So like that was really interesting, and they loved it, having that bridge between it, and it's just making metalwork tools, jewelry, whatever it is, accessible to everyone, because it doesn't have to be this big scary thing. And parts of it can be, parts of everything can be more complex and need more training, but the basics of everything should be accessible, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And also the sort of the niche information as well, like you were saying before. So my cousin, yes, she's got a degree in engineering, and academically, she's way more academic than I am. I failed most of my, everything at school. Um, but when she was in the workshop and we were talking about the metal, especially the soldering process and annealing and all this sort of stuff, and she was like, "This is the first time that lots of my lectures actually make sense.
Yeah.
This is the first time physically doing that side of it." So again, like just because somebody maybe has a higher qualification than you in very niche or specific areas, it doesn't necessarily mean they know more than you, even if that was covered during their education.
Exactly. And we found that with the engineers. So they came in and they were like, we want to learn about full penetration, half penetration welds. And a lot of what we do with it being more artistic based or sculptural based, we're not coded welders, so we don't have that sort of knowledge. Obviously, we know the difference between the different welds and things, but we don't have that real in-depth knowledge, like niche. So when they were coming in, they were going, so why would I do this weld over this weld for this sort of thing? And being able to explain it, but they've all gone to uni and you've just started you were messing around on lorries and now you can like fabricate and stuff. It's quite a bit of a full circle moment where you're like, okay, I didn't go to uni, but I'm doing all right. Yeah, I think it doesn't, I think it used to be a lot more different where it was like you'd go to uni and like you were guaranteed a job, whereas I think especially creative fields and stuff now, I wouldn't go to uni to do jewellery work or metal work. I think the best thing you can do is get stuck in and give it a go. And the best knowledge you can get is, like you say, you can have these lectures, but not be doing anything practical to back that up. And you can be completely clueless. The best thing is that hands-on practical experience.
100%. And also just accepting that nobody's ever going to know it all, which is what we the silver diploma at the Jewellers Academy. It is so broad because the first term is your fundamentals. Obviously, they are the important bits. And like you said, those are the bits that never change. Those are the bits we need to know. But everything beyond that, as long as you adhere to the fundamentals, there's so much, variation. There's a gazillion techniques. Everybody does things differently. There's no way anyone could ever do or know it all because it's just so vast.
Exactly.
But a lot of the time, especially with teaching and stuff like that, people say, "Oh, I can't teach because I don't know it all yet." And
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. And as long as you are clear about what you do know and what you're offering, it really doesn't matter. It only matters when people try and without saying it, when they try and put up a front and pretend that they know it all, because people can sniff that out.
Exactly.
Really.
And I think that's why so WTF, Women Teaching Fabrication, is so firstly it's a lovely environment to work in. Like I love everyone I work with, which is lush. And all six of us, because there's six of us teaching now, and we all come from completely different backgrounds. Obviously we all can fabricate and weld and things, but all of us have different niches and specialisms. And we'll be in a class and you'll speak to someone and you might advise them one way, and like you say, another teacher will come along and they'll be like, "Oh, actually, why are you doing it that way?" And it's not that there's a right or wrong, but it's just you can apply different techniques in so many ways and everything's so vast. And but having those two different perspectives, you can go, "Oh, actually, which one would I prefer? Which one works better for my project?" And it's better to have more ideas than not enough. So yeah, I think it's important not to be like, I need to know everything before I get started. The best thing you can sort of do is just get stuck in and learn as you go. As long as you're not working with really expensive materials, you're all right.
No, 100%. And like you were saying before, the WTF and the idea of being a child again and playing, that was definitely my experience. Because like you said, this is the safety information, this is what you need to know. Don't chop your finger off. Wear the PPE. But beyond that, I know they were keeping an eye on everybody from a bit of a distance, but beyond that, you were left to get on with it and play. There was no hovering, there was no, intervention unless you asked for it, or unless, you know, obviously if there was a real safety risk, but because they were keeping an eye on that, you could just play with the tools.
Exactly. And that's one thing I think I struggled with in terms of like traditional education and stuff. Like when I was doing my art foundation, I loved the creativity side of it, but having to go to strict deadlines and get put yourself in these little boxes and tick stuff off and everything, it's just not how I enjoy creating or making and everything. I think if you don't have a level of freedom to it, you're going to feel more restraint. And I think one thing I always say with people when they come to the scrap metal courses and stuff, I'll be like, see the scrap as like a jigsaw, and like you've just got to start piecing things together and it'll all work out. And like people get so stressed if they've not got an idea and they're like, oh, but I'm not creative. And it's like, no, honestly, it'll happen. And as soon as you take that pressure off and just enjoy the experience, that's when people really shine. And you're like, you're not creative, you just created a little motorbike or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just so, and everyone's got the same metal. So the most we ever have is like 6 people on a course, and everyone's got access to the same metal, but they'll all create something completely different. And I love that. That brings me so much joy, just being like, everyone works so differently. It's just lovely.
Yeah. And I always find seeing what other people do is really inspiring as well for your own creativity. Just like, oh, things that you would never have thought about doing in a million years, and then somebody just
Exactly.
there. So,
Yeah.
um, you know, like you were saying before with the teaching and when to start, I only know as much as I know because students have asked
Yeah.
questions, especially students who don't have any previous experience, because quite often they will ask questions that are a little bit, they're not stupid. They say that they're stupid questions. They're not stupid questions, but they might
More
be a little
basic.
field in terms of unexpected.
Yeah.
But that's when I learn.
Yeah.
Or when people make mistakes and something goes wrong, because again, that's when I learn, because then you've got to problem solve and you've got to, you know, come up with ways to mitigate for that, or how to turn it into something brilliant anyway, and all these things. And it's so invaluable.
Absolutely. I mean, like I say, we teach scrap courses at WTF, and generally we're MIG welders, so we're set up for mild steel. But obviously, all the scrap we have isn't necessarily mild steel. So problem solving and working out how to join things if we can't weld and things is one of the massive things we do. And the other week, I was creating an experiment ring, trying some new techniques and things. Like, hadn't planned it or anything, but just went for it, and it went wrong. And that's fine. Like, I'm not going to beat myself up about it for trying something new and giving it a go, because I've learned what went wrong and I can change it in the future. I think, yeah, I think we can get so hung up on being like perfectionists, and we live in this social media reality where like everyone puts their highlights online but not their failures, and or their failings and things. And I think, yeah, it's important to remember that you don't always have to get something right the first time. If you do, great. But it's not always going to be the case. And even as experienced silversmiths or fabricators or whatever, you're still going to make mistakes. It'd be unrealistic. We're only human.
I always say as well, like if everything goes right first time, the chances are it's actually quite detrimental to your learning, because you're not building up those problem solving skills all that
You've
deep.
got to challenge yourself, haven't you? And
100.
if everything goes right all the time, then you can't do that. It'd make life easier, but it's not the way. And I think it's important to learn from those, yeah, being practical and being like, okay, that's gone wrong, what could I do differently next time? Yeah, those learning moments are really important.
With like you say about sharing little bits on Instagram and stuff, I definitely think you should do more of that. But also, as a person sat opposite me on the screen dressed in black, I've got nothing against pink. You know, some people love pink. That's completely fine. It's personal preference, but not all women love
No.
pink. The thing that was frustrating me again on International Women's Day, when I did do a bit of a deep dive trying to find women sharing tool tips,
Yeah.
99% of it was everything was pink.
Yeah.
Or
No, 100%.
pink and hot pants.
Yes. And this is the other thing I've really struggled with. I actually had a conversation with my partner and like some friends recently. There's a woman I follow and she's in a male dominated industry. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. And then I found out on the flip side, she's also has, you know, an OnlyFans and is in her hot pants and stuff like that. And it's really tricky as a female because so much of you wants to go, yes, you do you, like you do what you want, but also it can be so detrimental still for those male being in that male industry because it's like almost leaning into what's expected of you as a woman and like that pink thing. And I think, yeah, so often as women, we're wanted to be put in these little boxes and we're just not. And yeah, I think, like you say, for International Women's Day, just seeing a sea of pink everywhere was not helpful.
It was that Lady Hammer post.
Yeah, yeah, I did see the Lady Hammer because obviously it had to be pink. And yeah, it's just, that's what I mean. Like, there's still so far to come because lady hammers, we don't want them to be pink. We just want them to be comfortable and use them the same as a male hammer. I didn't realize there had to be a difference.
No. And let's say, don't get me wrong, there'll be plenty of people that would like a pink hammer, but it's more the percentage wise, like you were saying about, you know, like hot pants and OnlyFans and all the rest of it. If it was a smaller percentage doing that, you wouldn't bat an eyelid. But when that's the majority of what you're seeing is the pink or the over sexualized and all that sort of stuff, that's when it is, as the general population, the percentage isn't quite balanced.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I've it sounds really silly, but like I've always been really careful. So when I was a mechanic, I didn't wear any makeup to work. I didn't wear makeup, didn't do my hair, made sure I looked really sort of as stripped down as I could because I didn't want to sexualize myself because so often you'd already be, I remember people making comments like, oh, I saw you welding earlier. You could be on one of those welding calendars or whatever. And it was like, all right, well, you saw such and such also welding. Do you want him to be on your calendar as well? Like, and like you have people, I had someone touch my hair once, like put their hand in my hair, and it's just like, why, because I'm a woman, do you feel like you can do that? So making sure I didn't sexualize myself was really important. Whereas now, like when I'm welding, I've got a pair of leopard print dungarees, I'll wear them if I want to, but it's really hard to find that nice sweet point of not wanting to lean into what's expected of you if you are a woman in a male industry, but also still being yourself. Why can't I be feminine and masculine as well?
Exactly. And like I say, I think some of that comes from how you're brought up, because if you're given the confidence that that's okay, that's great, but then you're still going to have certain challenges when you're out and about in the world. Have you had any issues in terms of buying tools in person when you go into tool suppliers or you're looking for equipment?
All the time. I mean, I bought a welding helmet the other week and the guy in front of me in the queue actually laughed at me as if like, oh, how on earth could this woman possibly be buying a welding helmet for her? And yeah, that's exhausting. It's exhausting constantly feeling like you have to validate your position in this industry because I've proved myself time and time again. Why do I have to continue to do that? So it's quite exhausting. But I have developed quite a thick skin and having to get used to just being like, go ahead, mate, laugh at me. I really couldn't care less. Because when it comes down to it, is he going to be able to MIG weld? Probably not. So please laugh away, mate, because you know I'm doing all right. That's the thing. It's yeah, I think you do have to just be able to take everything with a pinch of salt to a certain degree, which you shouldn't have to, but just trying to ignore the comments and how people treat you as a result of you buying your tools. Like I remember once we had an issue with a prop shaft on a vehicle, and I explained to the person whose vehicle it was, I was saying all the details and everything like this. And he went, no, that's not how they work. And I was like, okay. And he asked to speak to my manager, who then stood next to me and basically repeated word for word what I just said. And he went, oh, okay, no worries. And that's exhausting. Like it shouldn't be that way. But I think the best advice I could ever give to a woman is just learn to take it with a bit of a pinch of salt and just remember that you're capable of so much. So don't let idiots tell you otherwise.
Like I say,
it's lightly put.
Small-mindedness, but also knowing like when sometimes it's really good to challenge it and it's great, and other times it's just like, well, just it's not worth your time and effort, just get on with your life and completely ignore them.
I mean, I'm not saying don't challenge it, because I have challenged it. And I did take one of my ex-employers, I can't go into it too much, but I did take them to court as a result of the way that they treated me, because why should I be treated like that? So I'm really, yeah, it's that fine balance of learning to, the stuff that isn't hurting you or isn't really rude or derogatory or anything like that, learning to just take that with a pinch of salt. But if someone really challenges you and starts treating you differently or unfairly, challenge that completely, because why should you be treated any differently? So yeah, I don't want it. It's finding the sort of balance of what you can handle and live with, and what's like, no, actually this isn't fair and I'm going to challenge that.
I a few years ago I broke the blade on my bandsaw, and it's because I know you're supposed to take it apart and you're supposed to clean it out and all the rest of it, and I'm terrible, I don't.
Like,
So what is you end up with a build up of sawdust, plastic does what, whatever you've been working with, and then eventually it gets so compacted that the blade snaps.
Yeah.
So online I ordered a new blade for click and collect at one of those sort of well-known machine merchants that isn't like being cute. It's the next level up, so it's not super specialist, but at the same time it's not like somewhere that you would go unless you're looking for something fair.
You know what you're doing.
Yes. So I ordered this blade, and then I sort of trotted off down there to go and pick it up, and went up to the counter and said, this is what I'm here for. And he toots off into the back, and he comes back and he goes, oh, actually we didn't have the blade that was ordered in stock, we only had this blade. And all it was to do with the teeth per inch on the blade and the width, and I think it was like a millimeter wider, and there was like an extra tooth per inch or something. It was very, very, very minimal.
Yeah.
So I said, that's fine. And then he looks at me, and then he puts his hand on my shoulder and he says, do you want to go and check with whoever you're picking it up for? That's when I lost my rack. There's those occasions where it's like,
that's the thing, like, why on earth, like, just because you're a woman doesn't mean you've got someone controlling you or someone above you that's like making these decisions. No, you can go and pick up your own saw blade. Like, that's absolutely fine. It is 2024, let's not forget.
So it's like it is my bandsaw rant for about 20 minutes.
Honestly, no, I think that's the thing. I think it can be just so exhausting when you have those experiences, and then you speak to a male who's in the same industry and they just don't even get that, not even slightly. Yeah, it's not fun, and it's pretty tiring.
Yeah, but it's like you say, it's also remembering that just because somebody might be male, it doesn't necessarily mean that they know more. So for example,
no,
if there's obviously still the chance that I would have gone down there and I wouldn't have known the difference in the saw blades, but there's just as likely a chance that a man could go down there and wouldn't have known the difference. So I suppose it's having that confidence that when you don't know, you research it, you look it up, or you ask that question, but that still requires a level of confidence to be able to ask, or to be able to go away and give it a little Google.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, something great like that is, I know that Halfords, on their website, you can put in your reg and it tells you exactly what engine oil you need, which can be such a useful tool. And it's finding those sorts of things to help you with that. So I'm sure there's equivalents for like saw blades and things like that. But yeah, it's just do your own research, make sure you're really confident. And so often manufacturers of tools and stuff will have that information on their websites and things like that, or they'll have, I know I've got my Dremel, and I was wondering about some certain pieces, and I wasn't sure from the website what size they were and whether they were going to fit, and I was just getting myself,
give you any information on what any of them are for, do they?
Exactly. And I was just getting in a tiz about it, and the website that I was buying it from, I just spoke to their customer services and they said, yeah, this is suitable for your tool and things. Don't be afraid to ask it. It's not embarrassing. I mean, you can be a specialist in whatever, and you're still not going to ever know everything there is to do with that specialism. It would be impossible. We all have to sleep. Especially,
like you say, with things like that, with the attachments for rotary tools, there's so many.
Oh my God, that was one of the things, because most of my silversmithing is self-taught. And that is one of the things when I first started, I was like, geez, I don't even know where to begin. And just started looking at what other jewelers were using in like what if it was different tools and things. I think you've shared obviously quite a few really helpful tips and things like that. And I think, yeah, just surround yourself with like-minded people who have different bits of information and just absorb as much as you can. The other thing I did was always start, like, if I learned something new or found something really useful, just make a note of it, and just have, I made myself like almost a little Bible of FAQs for myself. Like, okay, I think I've written this down somewhere, and just refer to it. And like we say, don't be afraid to ask people either. Most people want to help you most of the time, as long as you're nice.
Yeah, 100%. Like I say, there's some, that's, I know we're sort of complaining about things that we have to sort of put up with when it comes to working with tools, but it really shouldn't put you off.
No,
Um,
not at all. I think so many of the women I work with just inspire me to just, I think that's really important. Surround yourself with like-minded people is really important. And I mean, I came to obviously you had the free course the other week, and I came to that and met like other silversmiths in the area and stuff. And try and surround yourself and throw yourself into these experiences of people who are in similar things that you're interested in, and build friends and connections and things. That's so important. I was speaking to a sort of Instagrammy jeweler friend this week, and I was asking, she posted something about wax, and I was like, oh, could I just ask you about this and everything? She was so happy to share that information with me because, yeah, most people don't want to gatekeep. You want to help other makers.
yeah, but similarly to what we were saying about the oil, I think it's very easy for us to all forget that the what it really is a basic thing for us to know, not everybody else knows, and we forget that other people might like to know it. So it's not a gatekeeping thing. It just doesn't always dawn on us to actively share that information. And I was thinking the other day, certainly in the Bristol area, because there's so many people doing sort of amazing creative things, but quite skilled things. I keep thinking it'd be really good to have a network of people in the local area who are used to using certain tools or maintaining certain things or have specific
Yeah,
skill sets so that when the rest of us have a question or have an issue, we can either know who to signpost to or know who to ask for that information or
that's such a
collaborate with.
lovely idea. I think that's what I love about the artistic community, is there is that sense of community, and I think that would be so lovely because I know I have looked on welding forums before, and they can be a little bit overwhelming. Sometimes people have loads of information and are really skilled, and like you say, it's nice to have that sort of, sometimes bringing it down to more basic things of, you know, you might watch a reel on Instagram and it shows you sort of start to finish, but it doesn't actually show you start to finish all those
No.
little bits in between and stuff, because it's not going to fit into a minute and a half on Instagram. um but yeah, there's all those little bits that you don't see. I know, like, um some of the like sanding discs I've started to use, so like the silicone ones and stuff, they're brilliant, but like for so long I had no idea what they were or what they were for or how best to use them and
And
things.
even those, there's so many different brands of them on the market and different color coding
Yeah,
and ugh.
it's so overwhelming. And I think the best thing sometimes with tools as well is, I know people often say not to buy cheap, but I think sometimes start on a, yeah, I would sometimes say start on a smaller budget item and see if you like it. That way you've only lost, you know, £2 or £3 rather than £12 or whatever, which is quite a difference because they do get used quickly as well. So I think sometimes don't always spend loads of money on a tool. Get a more budget version, play with it for a bit, see if you like it, and then maybe, you know, splurge on that item. My Dremel, I didn't start with a Dremel at all. I had a very sort of, you know, much more basic version, and it burnt out. So then I invested in a Dremel. But it's learn. Yeah, I think don't be afraid to, you know, buy some cheaper tools and play with them to begin with, and then once you've got more experience and more confidence, then invest in them.
100%. I'm with you. I completely understand the ethos of buy the best you can.
Yeah,
But a couple of things I think with that mentality to remember is one, not everybody is in the position to be able to afford those sort of tools. They're very expensive a lot of the time.
absolutely.
Everybody is different, so depending on your personality, dexterity, how you like to work, specifically what you're making, people will need different tools. And quite often when you're learning, you're not at that level yet. You don't know what you're going to be using on a day-to-day basis. You
Yeah.
need to try things out. And also that mentality is, I say, in its own right, it makes sense, but a lot of the time it stems from sort of 80s, 70s. Earlier, we didn't have the same level of mass production,
No.
which obviously has its own issues. But what that meant was you kind of did need to save, and you bought what you could buy and you tried to get the best you could because it would last. But that's because there wasn't the same amount of choice or access to things
No.
and the different price points.
Exactly. And when I was a lorry mechanic, I was an apprentice. I mean, the wages weren't great. And I couldn't go out and just buy snap-on straight away. So I'd work out what I needed. And then eventually, when I realized I needed a long-handled ratchet, I was like, okay, I'm going to buy a snap-on one. But yeah, I think it's so important to do, like we were saying, be a kid, experiment a bit. Don't spend loads of money on it. Work out what you want to do first, what you enjoy playing with or working, or what skill you want to develop, and then spend the money on it, because there's no point spending £300 on tools and then being like, actually, I don't want to use these.
And also the thing is, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's wasteful if you buy something cheap and then end up replacing it, because the secondhand tool market, especially for jewelers and
Oh,
makers,
yeah.
people will always want to, they'll snap it off you. More often than not, you'll get good money back for it. And even if it's something that's not worth, somebody will use it and somebody will benefit from having it. It
I
doesn't
mean,
have to go in the bin.
any scrap metal tools, WTF will take off your hands for you and will make metal sculptures from. So there's always, like you say, there's always a way to recycle things and bring that sort of, because one of the things I'm obviously really passionate about with being foraged still was a lot of the stuff I wanted to do was give sort of found or foraged items like a new lease of life, because so much stuff does go to landfill. So I'm very against waste as well, but I think, yeah, like we said, it's important, spend that £2 on that tool, find a purpose for it afterwards, and then invest in something better.
Well, when I was at WTF, I made a crown for my Uncle Rusty's birthday, but it was chopping the old hammer in half to make the spikes of the crown.
Exactly. And like, we've got a whole toolbox of old tools, because things like mole grips and stuff like that, they can make like excellent bird beaks and things like that. You've just sometimes, like I said earlier, like I always say, think of it as a jigsaw, because suddenly things like a hammerhead will piece together into whatever you're creating. And yeah, it's just lovely. I love seeing what everyone makes with different bits and bobs.
Especially old, there's something really pleasing about old rusty
Yeah.
tools in their own right. They're a thing of beauty.
I am a bit of a stig of the dump, so I say the dirtier the better.
You're too young, but the film Labyrinth.
Oh yeah, Labyrinth, David Bowie.
So near the end of Labyrinth, when she sort of breaks out of the crystal chamber sort of dance thing, there's Agnes, which is the little old stuff on her back in the dump going through on a day-to-day basis. That's just like, yeah, I am Agnes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
My friends joke that I'm a hoarder. My boyfriend, I do his heading, because I'll be like, I'll bring stuff home and I'm like, I found this on the side of the road. I'm like, I'm gonna make something from it. And he's like, it's gonna sit on the side for 2 years while she do nothing.
Then you get something out of it.
Exactly, because if you do throw it away, then 6 months later you'll be like, oh, that would have been really good for that. So I'm all for hoarding. Recycle everything. Everything will have another purpose.
100%.
And that, was it Mary Kondo who did the decluttering, and does it bring joy to your life, whatever? Everything brings me joy. I can definitely do something with it.
It's all about the maximalism. A couple of years ago, the ACJ, the Association of Contemporary Jewelers, had one of their symposium type things for their 25th anniversary. And lots of us were really excited because they advertised there was going to be a secondhand tool sale. So we're like, oh, amazing. Yes. Absolute element. And we spent the day wandering around looking for this secondhand tool sale. Couldn't find it anywhere. And it turned out is because everyone was so excited about buying more tools secondhand, no one had actually brought any tools to sell, because as an industry, we do tend to get quite attached and sort of hoard them quite a bit. But I thought that was hilarious. Just
I still have a bag with my the ball bearings in from the first clutch I ever changed on a lorry. I have no purpose for them at the moment, but I can't throw them away because they just remind me of the like joy that that job brought me. And yeah, I'm the worst person for decluttering and stuff like that because I will just keep everything.
It
Um,
sounds like the sort of thing you need to frame.
yeah, well, I do quite often. You can use ball bearings for all sorts of things. Like, they quite often get used for like eyes and stuff in sculptures when we're welding and things. So I could definitely find a purpose for them, but I can't get rid of them ever. As with most of the stuff around my flat and where I work and everything, it's just I'm always can have a purpose.
Always. So, if people did want to get into tools a bit more, or the more sort of, the larger scale,
Mhm.
larger, larger scale machinery. I always, when I say that, I think of, factories and stuff like that. But I think for a lot of people who do jewelry making, they think larger scale, they think about the angle grinders and
Yeah,
the power drills. So that's sort of the more hand tool side of things. If people wanted to get into that and try things out and play with them a bit more, what would your top 3 tips be for people?
I think without sounding too much like I'm just like promoting doing courses and things, I think definitely doing some sort of day course, even if it's a few hours on something you're interested, whether it's jewelry, fabrication, whatever it is, just to be in that environment, have like someone who's skilled there to teach you, who can answer your questions and help you build your confidence, I think is probably my top tip. So often we get people who've gone to WTF and then they end up doing welding in the future, but they needed that stepping stone to give them the confidence to then feel they could. So I think if you can, a course is really a good place to start. um, I think secondly, confidence is key, which is obviously easier said than done. So do your research, look at obviously PPE is really important, especially with grinders and things like that. Getting hot, sharp metal in your eye isn't fun. Have been there a few times. So I wouldn't advise it. So making sure your PPE, making sure you're set up in the right environment. I mean, in terms of using bigger tools, do you need some ventilation, things like that? And like I said, you can find all of that generally on sort of tool manufacturers, YouTube, Google, and stuff like that. And then thirdly, I think don't be afraid to just go for it. I think so often when it comes to jewelry or metalwork and stuff, you can become so daunted by whatever you want to make that you'll get so stuck in the planning because you don't want to start it. Well, I mean, I'm quite bad for this. If something feels a bit overwhelming, I just keep putting it off because I don't want to start it. What if I fail? But it's important to sort of try and overcome that and just go for it. If you're making something larger scale, make it on a smaller scale first, or use a cheaper metal. If you don't want to use steel to begin with, use a copper or something that you can sort of downsize or you do on a cheaper scale to practice first. But yeah, don't be afraid to just go for it. You'll probably surprise yourself.
And that's a really good point about the perfectionism, because if you take away the idea of the finished article and just focus more on the tools
Yeah,
and how to use them and what they do and things like that, it takes away that perfectionism of the finished piece, but things quite often then develop from that. And I say that all the time with coming back to the Dremel and the rotary tools. Like I said, more often than not, there's no information, there's very little
yeah,
information given about what all the tools do, or even what their point is. And then people go and buy all this stuff because they've been told to buy it, and they still don't know what it does. And I keep saying to them, instead of just either having it sitting there and being too daunted to use it, or jumping in and grabbing something and then ending up doing something to your piece that you didn't intend to, is just get a scrap of metal. Just
yeah,
actually put each of them in, have a little play, see what they do, see how they feel, and then
exactly.
preferably try and keep some sort of note of that so that you remember. But that takes the scary element away.
Yeah, I know when I got my first electric engraver, I was like, oh God, like this is, and it's so loud as well. I was like, oh God, where do I start? I quite often work with spoons and things like that. Quite often make spoon rings and things. So I just got some cheap spoons, and practice my engraving on that before I started on silver. You know, there's always a way to sort of try and overcome cost and things. So you think about using those scrap metals and things and practice on that first. It might be a slightly different result because obviously silver is a lot softer than stainless steel and things like that, but it's still somewhere to start. And I know when I got all my like different finishing tools and things for my Dremel and my rotary tool, was just again got like a spoon and did like a little finish on each of them so I could see like the different grades, the different finishes and stuff, and that, yeah, have a bit of a almost like a like I was saying earlier, like a little Bible that you can refer to and be like, okay, this is what it looks like, this finish, and how could that work on my project. Yeah, make your own resources as well. Yeah. I know one thing, I've just, because my Dremel got replaced because it's stuck on high speed and they were really quick, well, I've got a brand new one and they are quite useful in the Dremel. It's got all the different symbols for what the attachments can be used and everything, and I keep that poster because it's so useful. If I'm sometimes, if I know when I hadn't worked with sea glass before, I was like, oh, how can I adapt this, look, refer to that, and I was like, okay, so these different tools could be suitable for it. Yeah, I think there's always sort of a way around things, but I think confidence sort of is always key. Get stuck in and give it a go.
Definitely. And I think it's remembering as well, it's not that you're not expected to know how to use the tools, all the tools, especially if you've not been shown. No one expects you to know how to use them, but we just hope that more women would have the confidence to learn. And like you said before, just because somebody else is around tools or does something specific doesn't mean that they necessarily know what you're doing. Because yesterday it was pat testing day, so I had to have all the electrical testing done at my workshop, and you know the pat testing guy comes along, he's around tools all day, he's got all the electric stuff out, he's testing everything, and then he turns around to me and he says, what is this an engraver? And I just had that little moment of look at him, it's like, it's a drill. But again, you know, for us in our industry, it was a Dremel. But you know, but it was in a drill stand. It was in a pillar stand, and it was set up with a drill bit in it. And I was just like, for me, it's very obvious it's a drill, but for somebody else, because it doesn't look like a power drill for drilling into your wall.
Exactly.
Thought it was something very different. Yeah.
We've had it before, like, so like I said at the beginning of our WTF classes, we say about all the tools and stuff. One thing we always say is, has anyone used a grinder before? And a few people might put their hands up and we go, yeah, you're the worst ones. Because you build up those bad habits as well. And especially if you haven't had a bit of some sort of formal training or anything, you build up those bad habits where you're not wearing your goggles, or you're not holding with two hands, and you're not looking where your sparks are going. So there is that, yeah, it's that fine balance of, like you say, some people can seem like they know everything, but they really don't. And yeah, I think it's not, don't be afraid to admit if you're wrong as well.
And also just that things change, because you see that a lot with people who are trained or worked for a certain generation, because the PPE wasn't the same back then.
We didn't have health and safety in my day. Yeah. Yes.
But there's certain things that are very easy to put in place, and they make a big difference. So yeah, again, like I say, even with people who have a lot of experience, it doesn't mean it's the way we want, especially from a teacher's point of view or workshop facilitator, because we have insurance that we need to find out. So there's certain things that need to be put in place. But yeah, just being, like I say, that I don't know about you, but my hope is just that more people would feel confident to approach things and feel that this stuff can be for them. But like I say, it certainly doesn't mean that they need to know how to use it, because people like you and people like me and all the other people out there who will quite happily, you know, show you or learn together.
Exactly. And like all our courses aren't, although we're all women teaching fabrication, it's not always we're all women on our courses.
When I was there, it was about 50-50. It was a really, really nice environment.
And I think we often speak to our participants and be like, oh, what made you sort of join? And I think being taught by women is actually quite appealing, because there's none of that egotistical, toxic masculine environment where you have to know everything straight away. It is very much, come and learn. We're not going to judge you. We're here to make it accessible for everyone. And I think I'd love to see more of that in the future, just more and more places making it accessible, not just for women, but for everyone. to feel like you've got a safe place to ask questions and learn, and not that you have to know everything as soon as you pick up a grinder.
Exactly. In terms of how everything was presented, obviously there's technical terms, but the jargon was kept to a minimum. It was layman's terms, and here's the information that you're going to learn today.
Why overwhelm people with jargon? I mean, if you can explain it in a more basic way and make it more accessible, people are like appreciate that. So yeah, it's not making it an elite niche thing. It doesn't have to be. Yeah, I think that's important.
And I certainly think for any of us, like you and me, who do happily use certain things, I agree with you. I think we both need to start sharing a bit more online, just promoting these conversations.
I think so. I mean, Char's Cars doing little tips on how to check your car is coming.
100%.
I think 100%. I think it is important that, yeah, we can found that way of making it, here you go, I'm doing it, look at me, like you can do this as well. So yeah, we're responsible as well, I guess.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Lovely. Oh, thank you, Char. It was really, really nice to speak to you today.
Thank you.
Can you let everyone know where they can find you online?
Absolutely. So I'm on Instagram primarily as Foraged Still. I've also got Facebook, which is Foraged Still. And then my website, if you'd like to buy any of my bits and bobs, is foragedstill at .bigcartel.com.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was lovely to see you.